All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate you coming to my lunch and learn. Today, we are going to talk about native Georgia trees with really beautiful autumn colors. So, fall is the time of year when you would technically want to plant trees or pretty much anything, just simply because soil temperatures typically stay warmer for longer as we're moving from summer, which is really hot, into a cooler fall and then finally into winter. The timing couldn't be better. Sometimes it's dry in October and November unless we get a tropical system, but generally speaking, the conditions we can control a lot better. You you can plant in spring, but you're going to be doing a lot of watering. And if we get a really hot and dry summer, sometimes evaporation can exceed the newly planted tree or shrub or plant's ability to transpire that water, and sometimes they literally just dry out and they don't have the root system available to supply the water to the plant. So this is just a really good time. You get some establishment in the early fall before it gets too cold, and then you have spring where it gradually warms up. So it's really the best time to go ahead and plant in the fall. So I wanted to be able to provide this so that if you were thinking of planting a tree, you might want to consider some of these, which offer really pretty fall color. All right. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop those in the chat box and I will answer those at the end. I would also like to thank, and you'll see a slide on the back end, Dr. Holly. You'll see all her information there, but she is a tree guru, Campbell, and we're Holly groupies here in the extension office because she has such good stuff about trees. I'm also a certified arborist, so if you're seeing this and you have questions, you can always reach out to me at my email address. All right, native trees with beautiful fall color. There are a lot of them out there. Some of them better suited than others to site conditions. You may have a shadier area, you might have a sunnier area, but we always encourage folks to put native trees out there instead of some that may not be quite as suitable. We have a lot of problems with new subdivisions where they just get trees at a discount and put the tree in the front yard. You can replace those. You don't have to stick with whatever the builder put there. So if you have an option to replace something and you want to put something that's a little more suitable, pick something that's native that'll be pretty. Something that maybe has some wildlife benefit, that they have berries or something like that, or helps pollinators. There's a lot of different considerations to put into mind. So this is just a gorgeous shot of a lot of really pretty fall colors. So if you haven't been up into the mountains to take a drive and take a look at the fall color, you're probably on borrowed time. We had a lot of rain. We're going to have some rain this week. That's going to batter a lot of the leaves off. We were pretty close to peak over the weekend up in some of the higher elevations in Rabun County, which is in the far northeastern part of the state. They are already past peak. So you're looking at probably between 2,500 feet to 3,000, 3,500 feet above sea level. That's where peak color is right now. So you might be able to get up there this coming weekend to the mountains and take a drive across the northern tier and still see some really pretty colors. Hopefully it wouldn't be too cloudy. I think we're supposed to get a break in the rain before some more next week. So if you get an opportunity, this would be a good one to go check out some of these pretty colors in person. So let's, kind of take a short dive into what causes fall color. And to do that, you kind of have to know a little bit about photosynthesis. So I'm not, oh, the lights went out. So that's why it's spooky. And you can enjoy my skeleton earrings. So, to understand why trees will eventually lose their leaves, and these are deciduous trees. These are trees that lose their leaves. Um, at the end of the summer into the fall season. So you have to kind of understand a little bit about photosynthesis. So that's the process trees go through, or any plant really, to making its food and respiring, which is, basically the store production and storage of nutrients. So this is what a tree does. So they're able to can make their own food, which is pretty remarkable. Us as humans, we don't get to do that. We have to go to the grocery store and buy stuff. But without going too much into the chemistry of it, you can see you've got some carbon dioxide there, you got a little bit of water, you add some sunlight and the chlorophyll that the tree or the other plant has, and that makes glucose and oxygen. So having green things growing in your yard or in your house is a benefit because you're getting oxygen as a byproduct of the photosynthesis process. That's why everybody loves to have houseplants. It's improving air quality, gives you some of the extra O2 to breathe. So it's a good thing, right? Most deciduous trees will then go through a process of, since we're in a temperate climate, we're not in a tropical area, they'll go through a process where they start to separate their leaves and to drop those in the fall of the year. So, what causes that? Well, the coloration in the tree, this is from Dr. Kim Coder, in the Manual of Fall Tree Color Development. So the fancy scientific way. So autumn coloration in trees is a symptom of deciduous leaf. Deciduous is going to be a tree that loses its leaves at the end of the season versus an evergreen would be like a conifer, a pine tree. So anything that's deciduous is going to go into something called senescence. And senescence is going to be an organized, planned, and essential part of tree life. So basically, that's the process of closing down, reallocating resources, and sealing off a leaf. That's a really fancy way of saying a tree is going to suck back all of its chlorophyll and the nutrients in the leaf. It's going to separate that leaf at the base of the stem, and that leaf is going to fall. That's basically the fancy way of saying that. So, as we're looking at what causes fall color, there's three factors that are going to influence that. Leaf pigments. So not every tree has the same type of pigments nor the same amount of pigments, okay? Night length, obviously, as you're going through the summer, you have the autumnal equinox, and nights start to get a little bit longer and the days shorter as we move towards having the longest day of the year, which I think is like December 21st, something like that. That's the longest night of the year, sorry. And then weather, and that's going to be dry or wet, that kind of thing. So you have your leaf pigments, that's going to be your anthocyanins or your blues and your reds. Your carotenoids, that's going to be your red, yellow, orange, and browns, and your chlorophyll, which is green. So chlorophyll is the color that you see most often that begins to get reabsorbed or brought back into the tree, leaving behind the anthocyanins and the carotenoids behind. And so they're always there. It's just you're seeing the overwhelming influence of the chlorophyll, which is the green color. And that's also if you've watched in the spring as the trees leaf out, a deciduous tree leaves out. Now you're not going to be able to unsee it, but as that tree leaves out, you can see the reverse happening. So you can see those anthocyanins or those blues and reddish colors and the carotenoids, the reds, yellows, oranges, and browns being the most dominant until the chlorophyll enters the chat, so to speak, in which case then as that leaf comes out, fully matures, then you see the green. But the intensity of the colors are also going to depend on sunny days versus cool nights. So if you have a very prolonged fall or autumn period, you're going to see more red purple or those anthocyanins. If you have a warm, wet fall, you're going to get duller colors because there's less of a sugar concentration in there. And if you have a dry, sunny fall, then you're going to get brighter colors. So what's happened to us here this year? So we had a lot of rain in June. And then it was kind of dry and it stayed dry. So we got some rain just recently. Yesterday, we got quite a bit in the metro area and up into the mountains. So that might influence a little bit because down here, we're not to peak yet. So it's quite possible that if we'd had a little bit of rain, we might have seen some prettier colors, some brighter colors. I don't know. Right now, we may be poised to see a little bit more of a dull color if some of these leaves haven't already been knocked off the trees because of the rain. But ultimately, we need to all understand that fall color is a huge industry, any place where you have a lot of trees. So the mountains, hey, I mean, they make t-shirts that say the mountains are calling and I must answer. I own one of those, by the way. I love the mountains, and there's just something peaceful about being able to drive along like the Blue Ridge Parkway, for instance, where you have these beautiful vistas and all the pretty trees and leaves are turning colors and it's a very crisp fall day and you have leaves that are just kind of filtering down on you and it's sunny and it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. So there's something very comforting and peaceful about that, which is why it's such a big industry. So, you know, taking a little piece of that and putting it in your own yard is a good thing in my book. So, how does this all happen? Well, late summer, August to early September, as those days are getting shorter and those nights are getting longer, that tree's internal clock, which is called photoperiodism, there's no quiz, I swear, but it's gonna sense the decrease in daylight and temperature. So those hormonal signals are gonna start to shift, and those hormones being auxins, and those are found a lot of times in the very tips of the ends of the branches and around where the leaves are, and ethylene, which regulate growth and the senescence. Remember, the senescence is the aging, or basically as it's turning off things. And so the why? Well, that's shorter days and cool nights. This is the TLDR. Too long, didn't read the other part. Um, Shorter days, cool nights. That's going to signal to that tree that winter's coming. So it's going to need to prepare for that. And if you're a deciduous tree, that means you're going to drop your leaves. So the trees start to slow down in the food production. Most trees, and this is just an aside, if you have some trees like cherry trees will drop their leaves fairly early, usually in August. Most trees, assuming everything is normal, will have collected enough nutrients to get them through by usually late July. Ish, somewhere in there. So we get a lot of calls from people that on especially cherries that they're losing their leaves early. Sometimes tulip poplars, and it really kind of depends. But after about the end of July, it can be more costly for that tree to keep that leaf on there because you have evaporation going. And if you have a whole ton of leaves in a crown of a tree and it's super hot and it's super dry, and that tree's going through all of that evaporative process, it's losing a lot of moisture. And so that can be actually more stressful. So sometimes trees will drop their leaves early to conserve moisture. It's more costly for them to keep those leaves. So that's just an aside if you're wondering. We did have a dry end of summer and there were a lot of leaves that were dropping because of that. So basically that tree slows down food production, which is photosynthesis, and it starts to prepare for going dormant. So early fall, which is mid-September to early October, chlorophyll, which is that green pigment that everybody sees in leaves for the most part, it starts to break down. And as that fades, those other pigments, remember how I said those were present? They're always there in the leaf, and you start seeing more of those. I think I already mentioned that, but yellow and orange, like birch, hickory, aspen, that kind of stuff, those become much more apparent. So if you ever get a chance to go out west and drive through the mountains with the aspens, yeah, it's beautiful, bright, brilliant yellow foliage. So very gorgeous. And then, for instance, like sugar maples, you've got beautiful reds and oranges and a little bit of yellow, like up in Vermont. And then the anthocyanins, those are going to be your reds and your purples. You get a lot of those in maples, dogwoods, and sometimes oaks. And those trees are now at this point forming what's called a separation layer or an abscission layer between where that leaf joins that branch. So at the base of each leaf, where it joins that branch, or that limb, there's going to be forming a separation layer. So that tissue is starting to sever between the branch and the leaf. So that chlorophyll is very energy expensive to maintain, and that's what I mentioned with trees dropping their leaves early. So sometimes they'll drop them. So there's different reasons, and that was one. The other reason is because we're just at the end of the season. So the chlorophyll is hard to keep going. It's expensive for that tree. So when there's less sunlight there, for that tree to use in photosynthesis, it's going to go, oh, it's time to start dropping my leaves. So that abscission layer between that branch and that leaf, that's going to help seal off the nutrients and water flow so that the tree isn't going to lose anymore. That's going to conserve its resources. So that's why. So mid-fall in October, that chlorophyll is going to be mostly gone. And that's what we would think of technically as like peak leaf season. So peak leaf season in North Georgia to here is going to be any time between mid-October-ish, probably more further north, into I would say the first to second week of November if you had a longer or more prolonged, warmer summer fall. So chlorophyll is going to be mostly gone. The carotenoids and the anthocyanins are going to be the dominant pigments there, and that's what's going to give those trees a pretty goldish, orangey, and red-hued color. So those sugars that have been trapped in the leaves after that abscission layer has formed is going to intensify red colors, and those anthocyanins increase when the sugars build up. So why? Well, bright colors are a side effect of that chemical process. Now, I promised I'm not going to go too deep into the chemistry of it. But as I mentioned, those carotenoids and those anthocyanins are always present. And those sugars are going to chemically react under those cool sunny conditions. And therefore that's why you get more brilliant color versus less brilliant color during certain times of the year. Who knew, right? So late fall, moving into late October and November. By then, the cool weather, it started, the peak leaf season has filtered further south, and that's kind of where we are here, coming into late October, early November. That abscission layer completely seals the leaf from the branch. Okay. And if that happens, and then if there's wind or, you can go shake that tree, that connection is going to weaken and that leaf will fall off and fall to the ground. So the tree will reabsorb any remaining nutrients that are there, like the nitrogen and phosphorus, before that leaf drops. So don't worry about it. And as I mentioned, most trees are going to have enough saved up by late July, early August. So again, dropping those leaves, that's a mechanism for self-preservation, both in a drought situation and as they go dormant. And it also helps prevent limb damage in snow and ice. Because if you ever think about some of the late spring ice storms that we've had, and certainly those up in the more northern states where it can happen, if you have a tree that has leaves on it, or you have a conifer like a pine tree, and you get freezing temperatures in the air and rain or mist, that heavy ice that can form on there can cause a lot of damage. Those branches will break because suddenly it's that much heavier because you've got all of these leaves or needles that are holding on. So for the tree, self-preservation, much easier to weather a snow or ice storm when you don't have leaves out there. And then the tree enters dormancy. So at this point, it's conserving all of its energy through winter until it starts to reverse the process and the days get longer, nights get shorter, and temperatures increase, and then spring growth will resume at that point. All right, so early October. What trees can we plant now? We're kind of past early October, but if you're thinking about it for next year, what is going to change colors early October to mid-October? Well, so you can pick black gum. So these are very pretty. I mean, take a look. You've got really kind of this brilliant orangey red foliage. Simply beautiful. And it's kind of I think a salmon to red color. this you can't go wrong with these. So they are a native tree. They do really well here. They're not tremendously tall. Sometimes we'll have them in the understories and we just don't really notice that they're there. But this could be a very pretty tree to have in your front yard because, I mean, who doesn't want brilliant fall color? We usually try to think of trees if you're going to be putting them into your yard, be thinking thoughtfully about having 4 seasons worth of value to it. So maybe you get some blooms for pollinators in the spring. Um, Maybe then you've got a nicely shaped tree for summer. You might have some berry or nut production for wildlife interest in the fall. Obviously, if it's a front yard tree, that might be a little bit much because you don't want to have to deal with the berries or the nuts. But if you have some space in the backyard, that would be a good thing. And then the beautiful fall foliage that you can get for visual interest. So we usually try to kind of, if people ask us for suggestions on trees, that's something that we usually like to take into account. So black gum. Next is the flowering dogwood. So here in Georgia, flowering dogwood is actually a native. So what happens a lot of times, and I caution you, is that flowering dogwood is actually an understory tree. So a lot of times what people will put in their front yard is a Coosa dogwood. That tree can tolerate a little bit more sunlight than a flowering dogwood. Here in the South, it's just the sun is very intense, and if you put these as a specimen tree in your front yard, it's going to be stressed out, and it's probably not going to live as long as it would if you had it as an understory tree. So keep that in mind. This is not something that you just want as a specimen in your front yard. Even though it's perfectly sized, wide and tall, it's just it needs to be under other trees in order to be happy. So Cornus Florida, this one you can see has berry interest, so the birds will like that. Uh, it will seed, so just be aware of that. I do have some that pop up in my yard periodically. I do have a lot of these in my backyard, but you'll get a lot of really pretty fall colors. So you get some of those anthocyanins, the purpley kind of bluish, and the reddish kind of mauve. Reddish color. So just very pretty, mixed with some of those others that you have, the carotenoids with the yellows and the others like that. This would be a very beautiful tree. And again, you have the pretty flowers in the spring. It will flower out the first, and then the leaves will come second. And so it's kind of a harbinger of spring. I have several of these, as I've mentioned, in my yard, and I love looking out there in the early spring and seeing all the flowers, and I'm like, oh, spring's just around the corner, which would be probably mid-March-ish, something like that, in a normal year. Red maple. So Acer rubrum. So this one, I have a red maple in my front yard. As you can see, they are very aptly named. The leaves are quite salmony colored to red. It's a native and it does well here. It's a fast grower. It is susceptible to some cankers, so if you have had one in your yard previously, don't replace with this. But if you're looking for something that will be a fairly fast grower, has a nice kind of canopy that's will give you some great fall color. This actually could be a really good specimen tree for your front yard. Most subdivisions require that you have some kind of tree in your front yard. We hate to see a lot of times they'll plant oaks, which even the smallest oaks are probably 80 to 90 feet. And if you're talking about a postage stamp sized front yard, that's not conducive to having an intact driveway. Those roots will probably cause a lot of uplift and damage. So be looking at maybe replacing with something else. But red maples generally are pretty easy keepers by themselves. And you can see they have a really nice shape. They are a beautiful fall color, and they tend to leaf out a little earlier than some other types. So red maple would be a good option for a front yard in a subdivision. sourwood. So this is one that usually is just out back. You don't ever really notice it. It's in the woods, not something that maybe would be top of mind for a front yard tree or a replacement tree. But sourwood, is another beautiful tree that has very pretty fall foliage and also has wildlife benefit. So this is a good one for pollinators, and you can see there's some of the leftover flowers from the summer, but it's a good option to have out there for wildlife interest. And as well as the beautiful fall color that you're going to get from those anthocyanins. So this is a good option. All right. So some people are going to call this a weed tree or scrub, sweet gums. So down here in the South, for whatever reason, it's gotten a bad rap. It is a very prolific cedar. It's actually pretty easy to cultivate, and it's going to be generally in your landscape if you haven't disturbed or they haven't come in and cleared all the trees out. I have quite a few of these on my property. They were just there when we bought the property. But they are beautiful. They do have really brilliant, pretty fall color. In other parts of the country, as we were driving through the eastern seaboard on my vacation this year, we stopped at several Revolutionary War battle sites, and there were very mature, very gorgeously shaped sweet gums. And there they were revered. They were like, these are beautiful trees. The shape was gorgeous. I mean, we're talking, 100-plus-year-old trees. And they just had a beautiful shape, and those are gorgeous in the fall. So I can attest, even though if you get these annoying little balls off the females, they are gorgeous. They do have gorgeous fall color. So I kind of put up with it. We would have removed them long ago if it was, annoying enough. But in my situation, I have enough property that they are perfectly fine. And I get that really pretty pop of color that I see every year. And so you probably do have some. Maybe look out in your backyard. You will see them. They're not all annoying. They are native. They're not invasive by any stretch of the means, and they obviously have a very pretty fall color for you. All right, tulip poplar. So these are all over the place, native also. Liriodendron tulipifera, and it is one that a lot of times when it gets dry out, it too, as I mentioned, will drop its leaves early. So you may not get the brilliant fall yellows that you see here if it's been a hot and dry fall. Mine, I have several in my yard, dropped leaves early. They didn't even really go through that yellow process. They just dropped their leaves. And that happens sometimes. Some years it's wetter and they'll typically hang on to their leaves a little bit longer, and then you'll get more of this really pretty fall color. So this tree is pretty easy to source. It's all over the place. Pretty much any nursery you'll be able to find it. They do get quite tall. So keep that in mind. That may be a backyard tree for you, but they do have those kind of innocuous flowers. You may find the petals with the orange and the green and little zigzaggy white on in the spring, and you're like, where did that come from? Because it doesn't really look like a flower, but it is. Pollinators will utilize that, and then you end up with what you see over there in the bottom right as leftovers from that process. And then, of course, the beautiful yellow foliage that you'll get in the fall. Winged elm. So this is always an interesting one. We'll have people occasionally, I should have, this is, like I said, a borrowed presentation. I probably should have seen if I could source a picture of that tree without any leaves on it so that you could see this. It is a very aptly named tree because the branches actually have these very thin, almost wing-like protrusions that come off of them. And they're very weird looking when you don't see them with any leaves on. people think that there's a growth on the tree. And we'll get pictures that will come in, and no, they look like that. They actually, it's called a winged elm, and they have little wings on their branches of varying lengths. So it's actually pretty cool. I mean, now when you're out in the woods and you're walking, if you like to go hike in the fall, once the leaves drop, start looking at a lot of these smaller seedlings growing in the understory. You might find some of them. But the winged elm, you can see it's got some of the yellows and the greens, and then you get the rusty colors, and never so much of the real deep mauve, dark maroon colors that you do some of the other trees. But it is still very pretty nonetheless. So it's a good option. Chinese elms, which are used a lot in landscaping here, they'll drop a lot of little seeds that can be kind of annoying. But this is a good option for that if you're looking for an elm. All right, mid-October. So these trees are going to start changing mid-October. So American hornbeam, this is one that is just, I can't sing the praises of this enough. It's usually in the understory. It's just a very kind of hangs out in the background. You never really think about it too much, but if you're into planting natives, it is a good option for that. It's a very good, strong tree. It's got all the colors, as you can see. It'll go from greens to yellows to the really pretty fall reddish oranges that you kind of see here. So it's a good option for that. You do have some little seeds, but not that big of a deal, and is a good option for both wildlife value and for trees in your yard. This one can get a little bit taller, but it is suitable for front yard if you need to, and you can always put one in the backyard. It's very pretty to look at. So the American hornbeam. Ash trees. So this is a good street tree alternative. When I say street tree, you see below, a lot of neighborhoods, HOA neighborhoods, require that you plant a tree in that tiny little, we kind of call it a hell strip. That's actually what it's called, the hell strip between the tree and the sidewalk. The street and the sidewalk. And there are some trees that are suitable for planting here in that hell strip, and this is one of them. So Fraxinus species, there's a lot of different ones, but ash trees, you can get really pretty fall color. So you can see there's some trees, mature trees down below. You get the yellows, the oranges, the purples, that kind of thing. So you'll get a nice mix of these colors all on the same tree, even all the way through mid-October. So these are a good choice. Black walnut, Juglans nigra. So they're people probably think of these guys as because of the allelopathy. So if you know a lot about trees and you really study up on that kind of thing, allelopathy is basically the tree puts out kind of a repellent to other plants to not grow there. It's probably the best or most well-known tree for that. Black walnuts can get really big. And of course, then you end up with the fruit, which is about, yay big, maybe not quite tennis ball size. But if you like black walnuts, you can collect them and crack them yourself, and then you have the black walnuts to keep and eat. But wildlife also like them, so you'll have a lot of squirrels that'll come through, crack the nutshells, that kind of stuff. So they can be messy. Keep that in mind, but they do have the wildlife value, and then of course the pollinator value in the spring as those flowers are being pollinated. But you do need some space for these. They also do make beautiful lumber. So if you get a chance, and you may have seen some, but the problem here is that a lot of times companies will go out onto land, big landowners, and ask, can they go harvest any black walnut that they have? This happened to my own grandfather. They cut down, I don't know how many trees off of his property, and, he made some instant money, but then, all these beautiful trees are gone. So if you can and you have the space for planting one, hey, go for it. The leaves are going to be kind of that yellowish color, and then they'll drop mid to end of October-ish, and you do get those nuts if you do want. You can also sell them. But yeah, it's a good option, especially if it's an area where maybe you don't have to worry about cutting the grass as much. Eastern cottonwood. This is not one we see a lot down here in Atlanta. I have seen more of these up in more temperate areas and up into the mountains, but it's a very beautiful shaped leaf. Sorry, shaped tree and a pretty leaf. You can see there's an example. It's kind of a yellowish, brownish color. Uh, you can end up with some of the little fluffy, the name, actual scientific name escapes me right now, in the springtime. But it's a pretty tree. It's a very pretty shaped tree. You'll find them a lot around water. So if you have a pond or a stream or something like that, you may have one back there. But that's a good place to put one if you do have access to some type of water source, stream or river or pond. All right, Eastern, I think that's supposed to be hop beam. Yeah. So you can see this one also has that yellows and kind of the oranges and the reds. It also does have some of the visual interest after they drop their leaves. You can see some of the seed pods that are left behind. So having visual interest is a big thing. I mean, I'm always a fan of being able to have different things to look at. I spent some time in the Midwest, and it's hard when it's the middle of winter and you just don't have a whole lot to look at out there. It gets cold, you don't have a ton of pines, all your deciduous trees have dropped their leaves, there's not much to look at. It's just kind of boring until spring. So if you can have that visual interest, even if it's something that's just a remnant of what the past season was, hey, go for it. But yeah, very, very nice, gorgeous tree with gorgeous fall color, the Eastern hop beam. Sassafras, this is one, and this is laurel wilt, which is um, becoming a problem in the area. I believe it was found in Cherokee County. I don't know if it's in Gwinnett now or not. It's definitely in the metro area. So So it's in the Laurelaceae family, and it is prone to, unfortunately, the laurel wilt, which can kill it. So sassafras is a good understory plant. We've seen it. I mean, I have a lot on my property. I haven't had to deal with the laurel wilt yet, but sassafras is a very pretty yellow, orangey red, very interesting leaf shape. And this is probably when you will notice it most, is in the fall when you start getting that really pretty color. So if you have it, enjoy it now. It may, not be long for this earth, but until it gets the disease gets stabilized here, as with anything that's moved into the area that we didn't want. But yeah, sassafras is probably already there, and you may not have noticed it, but a very pretty fall color and a good native. Sugar maple. So Acer saccharum. So this would probably be a southern sugar maple. Most people, when you think of a sugar maple, you're going to think of, maple syrup. You might think of Vermont. And that particular sugar maple doesn't do very well here. It's just too hot down here. If you think of the difference in climate between Vermont and Georgia, there's a lot. So we have the southern sugar maple, and known for its very brilliant fall foliage. You'll get the yellows, and then a variation in the trees tend to get tipped early on up at the very top. You'll get those really pretty yellowy, reddish color oranges, and then it slowly moves down through the canopy of the tree, losing its leaves from the top to the bottom. So you can see there what the leaf shape is. Very pretty. Good street tree option, good yard tree option. Does really well just by itself as a specimen tree. No, you're not going to go tap it and get maple syrup fit. That's a whole nother process. But yes, it's a very pretty tree. Good option for a southern sugar maple, that is. Good option for a tree in your front yard. All right, sumac. This one is kind of thought of as a weed. It grows along the roadsides, so most people probably aren't going to think of this as something that they would necessarily plant. It does spread on runners, rhizomes, and you can have like a whole copse of this tree. So again, that's why most people probably think of it as just a roadside tree. Scrub would be another word for it, but it does have this brilliant colored foliage. So it's going to be kind of a yellowy orange to reddish color. And you can see the one that has been actually cultivated and pruned into more of a tree shape above the singular leaf structure there. But yeah, think of it a little differently. Maybe you have, or you can go out and dig a plant. There are different things that you can do to try to contain them from starting to creep a little bit out from there. Sometimes people will just plant them in a container in the ground, and that helps contain them to that one area. You can also, of course, cut off the sections that creep away, prune them out, cut them off, that kind of thing. But this is one that you probably haven't ever thought of, but it does have very pretty foliage. And obviously, as you can see by the picture, it can be pruned into a tree shape. All right, late October, bald cypress. So this is one that's kind of overlooked. But if you're going to plant it, make sure that wherever you are planting it, you don't have to mow the grass all the time. Um, it can be a beautiful tree in the right setting. But in a subdivision where you're talking about maybe a quarter-acre lot, if you plant one of these, you're going to get knees. Those are those little protrusions that grow out, and they're going to start growing up into your neighbor's property. Your neighbor is not going to be very happy about it because the lawnmower will hit them. It's not good for the tree either. So consider this only if you have a little bit more property or you're okay with dealing with those knees. It's deciduous, meaning it's not going to hold its leaves all winter long. A lot of times, and there have been stories that have been passed around here where landscape groups have actually cut these down because they thought that they were supposed to hold their needles all winter long, like a coniferous tree, like a pine or something like that, because the leaves do resemble that, but they do drop their needles, and you'll be left with just a regular old deciduous tree. So interesting choice, but make sure that you factor in some of the negatives of it if you're thinking about planting one. Chestnut oak, Quercus montana. So this is another nicely shaped tree. The leaves they don't look like your typical oak. It's a slightly smaller tree. This one might be more suitable. There are a couple that are more suitable at smaller sizes that would fit in maybe a quarter acre front yard. Nothing smaller than that, really. But you can see you get some of these yellows to reddish browns to almost a scarlet color. So this is a good option, and it does have kind of a conical structure, which is what most people in suburbia favor these days. But it's a native, so this would be something that you can put in your backyard and enjoy, or you could put in your front yard and enjoy. Ginkgos. So ginkgos are very famous. There are, all sorts of photos on the internet of these beautiful palisade walkways with ginkgo trees on either side, brilliant yellow, very pretty. And this is obviously what you see. So over in Japan, you get a lot of them. They grow here also. You don't want a female tree. The fruit of the female stinks to high heaven. So if you can get one of these and get a male, that's preferable. You can see they are very pretty, and they do tend to drop their leaves just in like all within a very short period of time. But before that, they are beautiful, brilliant yellow. It's a very desirable tree, only the female. So, if you think about planting one of these, they're a good option for good fall color and very interesting leaf shape. And trivia here, people will pay a lot of money for pressed ginkgo leaves. So, if you have one in your yard, you actually can sell the leaves on Etsy or eBay. People will pay money for ginkgo leaves because they use them in craft projects and things like that. So, there's your bit of trivia. Hickories. I love hickories. So this top right picture you see, I have one almost similar to that, almost identical to that, because we own some property up in Rabun County, and I actually chose not to continue my driveway from the road all the way to the house because I have a beautiful, it's still alive, a beautiful hickory tree that grows there, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And it has beautiful yellowish, rusty colored leaves every year. And then, of course, it has the nuts for the squirrels and the other wildlife that come and forage for them. It's a beautiful tree, and it's a very tall tree. It's probably about 120 feet tall, but it is a gorgeous tree nonetheless. So this would be something that if you were thinking of planting in your backyard, that would be a good option if you have the space to do that. It tends to be fairly upright. It doesn't have a very spreading canopy, but it is a great tree for its beautiful yellow color, the hickory tree. Scarlet oak. This is another one that is sold pretty, you know, pretty often around the metro area. Um, uh, it's got beautiful, brilliant scarlet magenta kind of foliage. It's it's an oak. It's a fairly slow growing oak. It's one of the smaller oaks, I would call it, but still going to get large nonetheless. So if you have a 2/10 of an acre lot, this is probably not the tree for you, but you can always reach out to us. We have lots of other options that you can look at. So scarlet oak, it's going to give you that beautiful, brilliant color, and it's pretty readily available to purchase at local nurseries. So this would be one maybe if you need a couple trees for your backyard because the builder didn't provide it for you, or you may have one out there and you just weren't sure what it was. Now you know. All right, into November. So the American beech, the beech tree. So I like beeches just because they have there are these little aphids that goodness gracious, they dance, and you'll find those in like June. It's a defense mechanism, but they like to hang out on beech trees, and I can't. Their name is, I'm sorry, I'll have to look it up. But they wave on the branches in unison. It's meant to kind of put off any predators. But American beeches, you'll notice them if you're out for a hike. They tend to hold their leaves like this, so you'll see them through the winter time, fall into winter, and then they'll drop their leaves closer to spring. There are some beech diseases that we're kind of watching and a little concerned about right now, but don't let that stop you from enjoying the beech tree, the American beech, and the little critters that like them as well. All right, white oaks. So these are very prevalent in the metro area. Quercus alba. They are very classic, so they can get huge. And they're easy to find, easy to source. You'll find a lot of these builders will put these in the front yards. They get big. So if you have a 2/10 of an acre lot, you might want to replace it with something that's a little bit more size appropriate because this will tear up your driveway. But that doesn't stop them from just being absolutely gorgeous. I have one of these in my backyard. It's very slow growing. So I think it was planted about 21 years ago, maybe, give or take. It was probably a 10-gallon tree when I bought it, and now it's taller than my house now. I have a 3-story house and back, so say it's probably like 60 feet, but they can get taller than that. You can see the one down below is in the right is that's multiple hundreds of years old. So as long as it is not planted in the wrong space and it has room to grow, it is a beautiful tree, and it is something that, if it's got a specimen quality to it, like it's by itself. It can have a very beautiful spreading branch structure and canopy. Willow oak. This is another oak that you'll find a lot of around here, Quercus fellows. Much smaller leaves, doesn't have your typical oak leaf that you're thinking about, like the scarlet you just saw before, the white oak. Much smaller leaves, has a pretty yellow color. So this is one that you'll find a lot planted by developers. Um, it's a pretty tree and it has that brilliant color. You can always pair it with maybe a red maple or something else, and you get that yellow, brilliant red, that kind of thing. But this is a very um, good tree to have in. It'll also have that acorn crop. I think mine had a mast year, meaning it has a lot of acorns at one time last year and a light one this year. So it does have that that you need to think about, but they're very small, so not as big of an issue. All right, so that is basically it. And this is Holly Campbell, Dr. Holly Campbell. She is over at the Warnell School. She was kind enough to let me use her presentation, and she has these resources here that you are welcome to get. This has been recorded, so this will go up on our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. If you missed anything, don't worry about it too much. It'll go there. And if you want a copy of the slide deck, I am happy to provide that. So here is my email address at Gwinnett County. So feel free to go ahead and write that down. Oops, trying to get the chat box up here. So we'll see if there's any questions before we run out of time. Are we going to see some trees? CJ's iPad, I'm thinking that it might have been an issue on your, yeah, there you go. Finally got pics after rebooting. Woolly aphids, that's it. Thank you, Cindy. On the beech trees. So in June, usually, almost every year, we'll get a little video or we'll get some photos of these crazy little woolly aphids that that's their defense mechanism. So they kind of group together and they'll be on these beech leaves and in the wind, and they'll just kind of do this little dance. Go search it up and look at it and find a video. It's really cool that there are things like that out there, and sometimes we get some really interesting stuff that shows up at the office like that, where we're like, oh, that's really neat. Yeah, it's kind of cool to be in natural resources and see some of this stuff. So, yeah, I mean, we get to see stuff like that all the time. But woolly aphids and beyond the beech tree. But there, as I mentioned, there is, I think it's beech leaf disease. It's headed this way. I believe it's in North Carolina. So that can cause some issues, and it can cause problems in that the leaves basically are damaged in the cellular layer, and so the tree will drop the leaves that it can no longer photosynthesize in, and it causes the tree to have to use extra nutrients to push new leaves out. And that happens early in the season. So that's bad because, as I mentioned, most trees will photosynthesize enough by the end of July that they're a-okay to make it through to the next year. But if you have a disease that's continually causing that tree to drop leaves and push new leaves out early in the season, those are extra nutrients that then it has to dip into stores for. So that's not good for it. And eventually you end up with premature tree death because it's used up basically all of its nutrients. So that is something we try to keep tabs on all of that. And they are going around and doing scientific research to see what they can do to try to slow that process down, and what can they do breeding wise, or are there treatments that can happen to help keep these beech trees alive, that kind of thing. But yeah, so this has been, as I mentioned before, this has been recorded, and it will be up on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel probably by later this week. So are there any other questions that anybody might have? No? All right. Well, that is basically it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I hope you all have a good lunch. Thank you.